A single passenger ship of prodigious size lay anchored in a port town in the northeast of the Principality of Reverie. Extravagantly crafted from top to bottom, a single glance was enough to discern its intended clientele, the privileged few among society's upper crust. True to appearances, the passengers boarding the vessel that day most certainly fit the bill, each smartly dressed and adorned with conspicuous opulence. Even among such guests, however, two stood out, a young lady possessed of regal air and the butler at her side. Judging from their dress, behavior, and linguistic register, they suited the setting to a prim and proper. The single factor that set them apart from the other guests was their ages. Neither looked to be much older than 12 or perhaps 13 years old, making them mere children in the eyes of most.
Just one moment, my lady.
The young butler labored to keep pace with the young lady as he dragged a large suitcase behind him. Despite this, she continued to stride forward, not slowing her pace in the slightest. Exhaustion creased his weary brow. His attire was proper, as befitting his station, but his unkempt hair, grown out long enough to completely obscure his eyes, was another story. On top of that, everything about his demeanor screamed that he was timid and weak of spirit.
"Snap to it, you dullard!"
The young lady brusquely shouted, now several paces ahead of the struggling boy.
"If you can't make those legs move any faster, I'll cut them off and feed them to the hounds."
She continued to increase her pace while assailing her butler with an unending string of contemptuous words. Her arrogant, haughty demeanor stood in stark contrast to her graceful appearance. Dressed in a lovely, black-frilled dress, her blue eyes shone like a pair of sparkling sapphires, and her twin pigtails curled slightly in perfect arcs. Most eye-catching of all, however, was the 50 regas stuffed bear she held close to her chest. Though it was large enough to draw attention, it didn't look out of place in the arms of a girl such as her.
Please, my lady, forgive me.
In response to the girl's tirade, the boy miserably sputtered excuses and breathlessly pled for leniency as he summoned his remaining strength to pick up his pace. After a not insubstantial trip, the two finally arrived at the ship's boarding gate.
"May I please see your invitation and boarding passes?"
The crew member working the gate asked, smiling politely. Up close, the ship was even more opulent. A prized possession of the Verne Company, its main route was between Reverie and the Calvard Republic via Lamelin Bay. For this particular trip, the entire ship had been reserved by one Haldor Barn, a wealthy merchant from Calvard. Passengers hoping to board required both a standard boarding pass as well as an explicit invitation from Mr. Barn himself. However, as each invitation included the room information for the guest in question, the boarding pass was strictly a formality.
"Ray!"
The girl called the boy by name and gestured with her hand, implicitly ordering him to present their credentials.
Yes, my lady. What do you require of me?
The boy asked, having completely failed to grasp his employer's unspoken instructions.
"You cannot possibly be this dense, you stupid worm!"
She snapped.
"Silence! The invitation and the boarding pass, now!"
Right away, my lady.
The boy began busily rustling through the contents of the suitcase, frantically searching for the requisite papers. Yet his haste quickly proved to be his downfall, for no sooner had he located the pass than a sudden gust of wind blew past, tearing the paper from his hand.
"Oh no!"
he exclaimed. The boy instinctively threw his arms out, stretching them to their physical limit, but his efforts were in vain. The boarding pass fluttered down to the bottom of the harbor, coming to rest gently on the water's surface. As though that wasn't bad enough, misfortune continued to hound the boy as a number of silhouettes swiftly appeared beneath the waterlogged document. A school of fish jumped into the air with a splash, spraying water all about. They then descended back into the harbor's depths, taking the hapless butler's boarding pass along with them.
Oh no!
The boy's grief-stricken cry resonated throughout the harbor. Trembling with fear, he turned to face his master, prepared for an eruption of anger followed by a vicious tirade of abuse. Yet it did not immediately come. The girl simply stood there in silence. She stared long and hard at the boy, her face betraying no expression whatsoever. After what felt like an eternity, she spoke. This was the calm before the storm. The boy began spitting out apologies, tripping over his words as his voice grew weaker by the second, like a short-circuited radio warbling its death knell. His body seemed to shrink, and his shoulders slumped like a criminal awaiting judgment.
You're absolutely useless.
The girl's anger finally burst forth in one violent blast. Despite the ferocity of her exclamation, she managed to save enough breath to launch a sharp kick at the boy in the same moment. The well-aimed strike sent the boy flying farther than her petite frame would suggest was possible. He seemed to hang in the air for a brief moment before resuming his journey downward off the edge of the pier, reaching a frigid end as he broke through the water's surface with a splash. As soon as he returned to his senses, he began violently thrashing his arms about, pleading for aid between coughing up mouthfuls of cold water.
My lady, please help me.
He begged, his thrashing growing more desperate and frantic.
You're going to find that pass. And I mean now. You're not leaving that water until I see it in your hands.
But I can't swim.
He burbled as his head began to slowly sink beneath the surface.
I'm well aware.
Please,
His words were cut short as his lungs filled with water and the rest of his head bobbed below the surface. His thrashing ceased and his silhouette grew faint as he quickly plummeted downward to the bottom of the bay. With the situation having reached an unacceptable level of risk, several onlooking crew members ran over to rescue the waterlogged Butler. The moment the boy made it out of the bay, however, the still enraged girl tried to kick him right back in again.
Miss, please, you must calm down.
The crew member at the gate said, trying to pacify the young noble.
How can I be calm about this? My father was unable to attend, so I am here in his place. There are important business discussions taking place on this ship that I cannot afford to miss, and now thanks to a certain someone's rank incompetence. That is exactly what is going to happen.
The girl gave the boy a menacing glare, so virulent it could have stripped the paint from the entire vessel.
Tell me, Worm, how exactly are you going to take responsibility for me being unable to board?
Though the boy was still coughing and violently spewing water, his already pallid face managed to lose what little color remained in it upon hearing those words. Feeling pity for the boy, the gate attendant stepped in. The boy moved to comply with this request, but was stopped dead in his tracks by the girl's menacing scowl. She produced the invitation herself and roughly shoved it at the attendant. The attendant read over the paper, then went through the list of names on the guest list.
This invitation is for Baron Chris Reinhardt, who I can confirm is indeed on the guest list. Might I presume you two are his daughter and her attendant?
You presume correctly. I am Baron Reinhardt's eldest daughter, Celia Reinhardt.
The gate attendant made a respectful bow before continuing to speak.
Then there will be no need to further concern yourself with the matter of the boarding pass, Miss Reinhardt. You may proceed.
Oh, we may?
Strictly speaking, a decision of this nature required approval from a higher-ranking employee, but in this case, the gate attendant decided that swift action was the best way to provide a peaceful solution to the rapidly worsening situation at hand.
It seems as though you'll live to ride another day, you useless worm. Count yourself lucky.
The girl boarded the ship, still staring icy daggers at her butler. He dragged their luggage on after her, still wheezing and dripping wet from the events of the past few minutes. He effusively expressed his gratitude to the gate attendant as he passed, receiving a sympathetic smile and a few words of encouragement. Having finally boarded the ship, the two youths immediately headed for their room. Their pace was quick, as though they already knew the way, and not a single word was exchanged between them as they briskly walked down the halls. Once they arrived, they gave the room a quick yet thorough search.
Infiltration complete.
The girl broke their silence, suddenly speaking in a sleepy drawl. Her eyelids drooped, and she let out a mighty yawn, not a trace remaining of the tense, high-handed young lady from only a few moments ago.
I'm beat, S. Think I'm gonna take a nap.
She tossed her plush bear onto the bed and immediately launched herself after it. She dove under the covers with childlike exuberance, befitting someone her age, perhaps even younger. In contrast to her whimsical new demeanor, the boy remained completely expressionless.
Don't let your guard down. The real mission begins now.
His voice was alarmingly calm and terse. As he brushed aside his bangs, still wet from the frigid water of the harbor, his now visible eyes were cold and sharp. Beneath that, however, was the gleam of a hunter fixed on its prey. Each and every ridge of his body exuded composure. the flustered, stammering Butler from before was nothing but a memory. Though the girl's transformation was strange, the boy's sudden shift in personality was nothing short of jarring.
That wasn't really your best work out there, S. Far from it.
She spoke nonchalantly, rolling around the bed as she critiqued the boy's performance. He remained silent for a moment before speaking, almost as though he agreed with her assessment, at least in part.
It didn't affect the mission.
But you overdid each and every reaction. It's not easy to match that without seeming unnatural, you know? You hamming it up like that made us stand out more than we needed to.
Despite her words, the girl's half-hearted tone took the bite out of her criticisms. These were the duo's true personalities. The upper-class young lady and her bumbling butler making a spectacle at the boarding gate were simply elaborate pageantries, acts necessary for gaining entry to the ship and nothing more. Any other method of infiltration might have raised suspicion, endangering their mission. Thus, they chose to board under false identities. They had made clever use of the organization's info network beforehand, ascertaining which of the invitees would be unable to attend. Armed with this bit of intel, they created their personas. The invitations required for boarding were printed on high-quality paper, but ultimately differed only in name. Using the same layout for each invitation was the logical choice for a merchant looking to pinch Mira wherever possible. Logical or not, that particular decision had made the necessary forgery a walk in the park. The boarding pass, on the other hand, was a different story. The Verne Company was known to employ cutting-edge technology to prevent forgeries. Attempting to use a fake pass to board was an act accompanied by a considerable amount of risk. This is why the two engineered the dramatic performance that took place at the boarding gate. The boy dropping their boarding pass was, of course, an intentional act. Both the gust of wind and timely group of fish were the result of a battle orbment the girl had kept hidden in her stuffed bear, a clever method she had used many times in the past to cast arts unnoticed. All of their hard work had paid off. The infiltration had gone exactly as planned. It was yet another successful operation for the boy, known as 3 of Swords, and the girl, known as 9 of Swords, in their life as professional assassins. To be continued.